Thank you, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I have to say that as someone who's been to too many Conservative and Labour Party conferences over the years, one thing I've noticed there is that the rooms tend to get smaller, and yet the number of empty seats gets bigger. UKIP must be doing something right, because the opposite is true here. The rooms get bigger, and yet the number of empty seats hardly any at all. The UKIP poll rating has doubled since the general election, sometimes trebled. Your leader causes more viral outbreaks than the H1N1 winter flu bug. Attempts by the Lib Lab con to portray you as extremists or racists have collapsed. Look what happened to Baroness Barcy on local election night. I think it was her own activists who shouted her down and told her she was just sending more and more of their number in your direction. And what did you get where you stood? I think an average score of around 13%. You've had a steady stream of Tory defectors. You're seen by the electorates having been right about the euro and increasingly right about the EU in general as well. So yes, you're all doing very well. But there's another question that a successful and ambitious political party must always ask itself. Could we be doing even better? Because UKIP has at the moment the perfect political storm. The Liberal Democrats can no longer be an all things to all men protest party. Labour is in the position of Les Dawson's mother-in-law, gone but not forgiven. And then there is the Conservative Party and Mr Cameron. What do we think about him? Well, boo and heckle if you must, but I put it to you, you might as well be cheering, because the man could hardly be a more perfect Tory leader for UKIP's purposes. Had you designed him yourself? Then there's Europe. Already tarnished by the memory of his cast-iron guarantee about Lisbon, we now witness Mr Cameron's extraordinary inability to take a clear and principled position on a referendum or on the whole course of EU integration. Last October, he put down a three-line whip against the referendum. Then he lurched into what we might call a sceptic spasm in Brussels in December, but then took fright at what he had done, and was even then humiliated in the House of Commons by Ed Miliband, and believe me, that takes some doing. A veto, observed Ed, is not for life with this Prime Minister, it's just for Christmas. Then, back in Brussels, a few weeks back, Mr Cameron appeared to completely rule out a referendum, only to rule it back in again in the Sunday Telegraph 2 days later. But he couldn't say when it might be, what the question posed might ask, only that it shouldn't be yet. This week he repeated the trick. He told the Daily Telegraph he would never campaign to leave the EU, thus blowing the pretence of renegotiating membership terms. And then he got his Downing Street helpers to phone round the rest of Fleet Street the next day, saying he didn't mean a word of it. So yes, Agent Cameron is doing sterling work. But I advise you to tell him to tone it down a bit, or his cover will be blown. More seriously, we have no growth, we have falling living standards, we have continuing disillusionment with all the Westminster parties. The economies of continental Europe are reduced to basket cases by the single currency. It's all in place. So the question we should be asking is not merely about how well we're doing, but how could UKIP do even better? We've already had some good speakers today, and that's Paul Nuttall with jet lag. What must it be like when he's on full energy? Who've told you that you need to get people used to voting UKIP in local elections. We have the police commissioner elections, and particularly the absolutely crucial county council elections next spring. Now, I've been talking to Conservative MPs in the line of my duties, and this crops up quite a lot. They are very, very full of unease about how they're going to do at the county elections. They know that they're in for a drubbing, and they're acutely aware of the potential for UKIP to take tens of thousands of votes from them and knock out scores, hundreds of sitting councillors. Now, not only would this be a humiliating blow for the party leadership and its morale, it would also remove from the Conservatives much of their campaigning base, because many activists, as you will know, are councillors or are related to councillors, and once they lose those seats, in circumstances where they're already fed up with the direction of the party, many of them will drift off. Some of them will come towards you, others will probably give up active politics for a while. So it's not just about delivering a result next spring, it's about limiting, doing collateral damage to the Conservative Party as an election fighting machine in future contests. A key challenge for UKIP, which has already been mentioned a few times today, is to broaden the agenda. At the local elections next year, I hope that UKIP presents itself, and I'm sure it will, as the party of common sense and value for money, up against three parties of political correctness and excess bureaucracy. On Europe, on immigration, and on the human rights regime, UKIP has led the debate and is winning the debate. But today I want to highlight a couple of policy areas which I think have great unexploited potential for UKIP, where if you can get distinctive popular messages across, they can broaden your appeal, deepen your appeal, and make your poll rating nudge up all the time, but also be more resilient if Cameron or another Tory plays a sort of Eurosceptic gambit, such as he did last December. The first of these areas is law and order, where amazingly none of the Westminster parties wishes to be known as the party of law and order these days. All three are promoting now so-called alternatives to custody, despite compelling evidence that a rise in the prison population has led to fall in crime. Well, if you lock the offenders away, contain them, and by treating them fairly stiffly, deter other would-be offenders outside, it stands to reason. The British people can see this, we can see this, and they're not impressed with Ken Clarke and Nick Clegg and Ed Miliband saying, I will never accuse the coalition of being soft on crime. Well, why not? Because it is. And let's you pick the party to tell people it is. The other major area I want to talk about today is one where I think you can change perceptions and surprise them, and that's on the National Health Service. The polls show the vast majority of the British public are fully behind the concept of the National Health Service. Labour has its biggest lead over the Conservatives by far on this rather than any other issue, about 20 points ahead. That's not because it's got any new policies or it's done any new thinking. It hasn't. It just has a simple and fairly catchy message. It tells voters about the NHS, we built it up, they're messing it up. They have the Tories on the run. Nigel Lawson once observed that the NHS was the new national religion. I think that was about 20 years ago. It remains true today. I was looking at some more polls lately about the levels of trust in various professions. I think the bankers were last, on about 8%. Then came the politicians on 10%. And in a notable triumph, journalists were rated at 11%. I think that's a bit of a landslide. But doctors were up nearly at 90%. And nurses are held in similarly high regard. So no wonder the Labour Party has the Conservatives on the run on this issue, where you have Andrew Lansley dropping a bombshell that nobody expected, a top-down reorganisation that David Cameron had promised would not happen. Now, he is seen to have broken his word, and health is a very important political issue. Looking at the rankings of what people consider most important, it normally comes in third, behind immigration in second, and the state of the economy, obviously, these days, always top. Another thing about health as a policy, which fits in very well with UKIP, were you to become the centre-right party of the NHS, is that it's an even higher priority, the section of the electorate that you do best in, for the over 60s, for the grey vote. These are people who've paid national insurance all their lives, and quite rightly expect the National Health Service to be there for them as they increasingly need to call upon it. So I would urge any ideological privatisers, free enterprise gurus, to be pragmatic on this. The British people have made their mind up. They want the NHS. UKIP should be the party of the NHS. Why let Labour have all the momentum and all the fun on this issue? And particularly in local areas, people hate it when any NHS facility closes down, even if it's not particularly highly rated in the league tables. So every time a health centre, a hospital, an A&E unit closes or is threatened with closure, don't let Labour be the people outside saying, you've betrayed us, Mr Cameron, stop cutting our health service. Let's have UKIP doing that. Let's have UKIP in areas where Labour's not even there, taking the government to the field. There is one fairly fundamental area where I think you can outflank them as well, and that is, if you go back to those initials, NHS. The N stands for national. It's a national enterprise. Under Labour, increasingly, you might have known it as the WHS, the World Health Service, because they were far too soft on health tourism. And if you've talked to anyone who's been sitting in an A&E waiting room or another waiting room and has found that they're the only person in the room that's speaking English, I can assure you, you will speak to them afterwards, you will know the depth of their resentment about that. And it's not surprising. This is a great national undertaking. People pay in as a nation to care for previous generations and their own generations. There's fierce resentment about the resources of the NHS being drained off by new arrivals who've never paid in a penny. Labour won't go there. Obviously, on the Daily Express, we continue to hammer away at the EU. We have this great policy in common with you. I must say it's surprising that almost every other policy we agree with you as well, as I keep telling the editor, whether it's climate change, a flatter tax system, too much political correctness. I think the general attitudes and ideas of UKIP tally with us far more closely than does any other party. I hope we can take a smidgen of credit too for the Daily Mail beefing up its attitude. The arrival back there of Simon Heffer, who I know is also a good friend to the party, has helped enormously. Interestingly, in the last month or so, we've seen The Sun toughen up its Euroscepticism after many years of almost not mentioning the subject at all. I believe there's something of a tug of war between the great Trevor Kavanagh on one side and the political editor Tom Newton-Dunn, who happens to be the son of the Lib Dem MEP Bill Newton-Dunn. That's the bad news. The good news is that Trevor appears to be winning. I quickly want to say something about social media. A couple of years ago, I was very suspicious of the whole phenomenon of Facebook and Twitter, thinking that Twitter existed for people to say, I've just eaten a cheese sandwich, and now I'm going for a walk. I couldn't have been more wrong. I don't know much about Facebook, but as a campaigning political tool to spread ideas, Twitter is magic, to be honest, and I found it extremely useful myself, and I know there are many UKIPers who are on Twitter. It gives you almost like a captive audience to float ideas by, to respond to questions on. It's a very, very useful thing, and I would urge you, everyone with a home computer or a computer at work, to set up a Twitter account. And if you identify as on Twitter as UKIP and follow me, I promise you I'll follow you back. And I don't say that to members of any other political party. I think you're doing fantastically well. I think over a 5-year time frame there's enormous potential. Over 10 years the sky really is the limit. I want to say that I'm with you all the way. I'll do whatever I can to help. I'll give advice. I'll write my observations to my readers in my columns. And I hope and increasingly believe that UKIP can be the party that fulfilled a mission that William Hague once defined, but then gave up on, and that is to get our country back.
Yeah.